Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Developer Spotlight video here at Mapbox. I'm Chris Wong, Senior Developer Evangelist, and I am joined today by Tristan Morris, who is the founder and CEO of Disaster Science, and we're going to talk today about their project called bushfire.io. So welcome, Tristan, and can you, I guess, start by introducing yourself and your company and tell us a little bit more about the product?
Hi, I'm Tristan. I'm the founder and CEO of Disaster Science, and we created a product called Bushfire.io, which I guess we'll kind of get into a little bit more shortly. My background, I guess, is in computer science. I've spent the past 15 years kind of practicing in kind of a variety of fields in that discipline. Most of my roles have been kind of within federal government, around things such as network engineering, information security, data science, high performance compute, AI, ML. Funnily enough, nothing kind of in, I guess, kind of spatial systems. I've been aware of them and how they kind of work and all of that stuff, but that's kind of it. And then I guess kind of towards the end of my federal government career, I ended up doing studies in psychological science. And yeah, I guess just really trying to kind of bridge that gap kind of between the computer and the human. And yeah, it's kind of interesting.
Awesome. So bushfire.io is, I guess I can summarize it just from the little bit that I've used it as kind of a live tracking system, or kind of a data aggregation and map of wildfires and all the conditions that support wildfires, and just so people who are interested or need it at work can actually kind of stay tuned to the most up-to-date information about wildfires in their area. Is that accurate?
Yeah, absolutely. So the app and I guess kind of platform itself. So we collect as much information as we kind of can about bushfire. So we call it bushfire in Australia, and like wildfire, forest fire kind of elsewhere. That's kind of, I guess, where it started. But now I guess it's kind of become more of a natural disaster kind of type platform. So you can see what's happening around you. So I live in, say, Canberra in Australia, and I want to know, like, we're surrounded by quite dense forest, and there's only a couple of ways kind of in and out, like to the north or to the south. And so you kind of want to know what's happening around here. And so we've had a couple of fairly large fires close by that have threatened kind of the city here. And so lots of people are kind of in that position where they want to know what's happening around them. I guess in the news recently, we've seen the smoke that's come down from Canada all throughout the US. And I guess people there are wanting to know, where's it coming from? What's happening? Or if you're closer to the fires, you want to know, like, how close is it to me? Am I going to be impacted by it? Is it going to cause problems? And so, yeah, we've gone about solving that problem.
Excellent. Can you give us a little bit of a tour and maybe tell us more about the product?
Yeah, so I guess Bushfire kind of came about a couple of years ago. So back in 2020, when we had our fairly large Australian fires, which I guess were in the media everywhere at the time. So I was holidaying down on the south coast, so down where the big red arrow kind of is. And so this is one of the maps produced by one of our emergency services. And so, like, looking at this, I was down in this kind of like area where nothing was kind of seemingly happening. Meanwhile, there was a lot kind of going on around us. And I was kind of figuring out whether I kind of stay here or do I head back to Canberra or not. And I guess I ultimately made the decision to kind of leave. And so this is like one of the pictures from, I guess, kind of that day leaving. And so I left at, like, say, 4 o'clock in the morning or so. And there's just this kind of eerie smoke kind of haze all around, and just driving back kind of through that area. And so I was fortunate to get back home safe and sound. But then when I got back, I checked the news and saw this picture of one of the towns kind of to the south on that map that was just overrun by fire that had kind of swept through the town. And I guess, like, roads were closed down to the south. And I guess this was only kind of a portion of what was actually happening that day. So this was the picture that was, I guess, kind of in our media over here, where you just have this, like, one police car that's just set up to kind of block people, and there's just this like wall of smoke, wall of kind of massive fire kind of ahead. And I guess like you only know this because there's media reporting of this stuff kind of happening. And in my situation, like I didn't know what was happening. Um, Again, like another picture of people who are kind of forced to evacuate down to the beach um, uh, during that kind of black summer that we had. And I guess like all of this kind of really just kicked me into doing something about it. So like all of the best information that we kind of had at the time was just not really giving you enough information as to what was happening around you. You didn't really have that kind of information to know whether you should stay or go. And like I kind of went through that, and many other people kind of did as well. And some were fortunate to get out safely, others weren't, and some people were really unfortunately killed as well. And I kind of think that there's like some really good technology that we have out there these days, and why aren't we kind of like applying that more to kind of this problem space? And yeah, so this is, I guess, kind of one of the really early versions of bushfire, I think, using Mapbox maps behind the scenes. And there's a lot kind of going on, and it's quite cluttered as to what that kind of original version was. But I guess like the general idea, so kind of coming back to the like living in Canberra, this was a fire that kind of started to the south of Canberra. And you can quite clearly see like the polygon around the edge. So that's like the active known fire boundary overlaid with hotspots from satellite. So you can see that there's, I guess, certain areas that are more hot than others. There's more actual fire kind of there. And I guess kind of the particles that you can kind of see just at the moment, I'll show you the live version in a sec, but you can see that there's, I guess, the idea that the wind would be pushing it kind of towards the south as opposed to towards the north, towards the city, which would be less ideal. And there's also, these aircraft on the map as well. So like if you're kind of sitting back, seeing kind of what's happening, you can see that like essentially resources are kind of being put into this, and that's all kind of helping, and it gives you this kind of quite intuitive picture as to what's happening. 12 months kind of on from that, this was a fire that was threatening Perth in Western Australia. And so that same kind of picture is just like a little bit more kind of clear as to what's actually kind of going on. So the same kind of details in here, the icons are cleaner, the polygons are kind of cleaner. You can, I guess, see a little bit more accurately as to what's kind of happening. But that same kind of problem of like people are in these forested kind of areas, and they see just this massive smoke in the distance, and what's happening? Is it coming towards me? Is it not? And so I might just switch screens if time's not too terrible.
So this is the live site right now.
Yeah, that's right. So this is the live site looking at Australia at the moment. So over towards our west coast, we have like a fairly large storm system that's kind of rolling through at the moment. On the map, you can kind of see like the winds kind of pushing that towards the east. These kind of blue dots here are lightning strikes. And so kind of coming back to that fire kind of problem, like you can see where there's positive lightning or negative lightning. So lightning that's like more likely to start a fire on the ground, or damage equipment, or whatever else. And so you can see that it's kind of hitting this kind of coastline along here. There's these wind barbs, which I guess are kind of giving you that like the weather has actually been observed in this location, and you can see that it's kind of pushing it towards that southeast kind of direction. But so this is, I guess, most useful kind of in I guess situations where you do really want to know what's going on around you.
So very quickly, somebody who's looking at exactly this area right now and comes to this site, what kinds of decisions are they making, or what's their role in this? Are they a resident? Are they a responder, or are they a technician working on a electrical grid, or what kind of people are they who are watching this?
Yeah, pretty much all of the above. So the people who are, I guess, using this are like mums and dads, families who are using this, they might live kind of in these locations and see, I guess, kind of they want to know what's happening around them. So this is over in Alberta, where there's, I guess, kind of a few wildfires at the moment. And so they want to know what's happening around them. Emergency responders want to know where they can position vehicles safely, where they can work on fire perimeters without being overrun. They want to know kind of when the wind is going to change or what the conditions are kind of like for the day. And so they kind of get that information kind of directly to them. Critical infrastructure as well. So companies who run cell towers, oil and gas pipelines, port, shipping, defense. You want to know when all of this is kind of potentially under threat. So over towards, I guess, towards Ottawa and kind of down towards New York, you can see like there's still quite a lot of active fires kind of happening. And unfortunately, in this location, you can't actually see the polygon kind of areas that I guess have been identified as like known kind of warning areas. But yeah, we're trying to get access to that information at the moment.
I see. And I think last time I looked at this, I've only seen Australia and North America. How much coverage do you actually have? And is it, I assume it's just limited to, where you can find the ubiquitous data that you need to present all of this. But where, are there parts of the earth that you're not able to cover?
Yeah, so at the moment, I guess we're covering Australia in probably the most kind of detail. We've added in the United States and parts of Canada. So we're kind of working actively on Canada at the moment. And that's, I guess, kind of one of the really big problems is accessing kind of high quality data. Usually it's kind of jurisdiction by jurisdiction. So it's like one state might have varying kind of levels of data available. And there's, I guess, kind of, a lot to almost integrate and bring together and to, really understand kind of what's happening in fairly crazy kind of formats is a big challenge, I guess, that we have.
So there's clearly a ton of data moving around. So I saw lightning strikes, I saw hotspots, I saw fire boundaries. Maybe I'm not using the right term there. But obviously, timeliness and aggregation of all that data is important and a big challenge part of this. Can you tell us more about how you manage the data pipelines for all of this data? Maybe some fun stories about weird formats and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the big problems I still have is figuring out the order of latitude and longitude and like bounds and what the correct numbers actually are and when they're exceeded or not exceeded and handling all of those kind of fun edge cases. But I guess it kind of goes to kind of say that it's geographic data is simple but really complicated at the same time. So it's usually representing something that's kind of important, right? Like it's real world. In this kind of context, it's kind of critical for people to be able to look at and understand and interpret and be able to quickly summarize that like this area is a problem, this area is kind of not. And I guess we have a fairly large custom data processing pipeline to collect, process, and then output, I guess, a lot of what you're seeing kind of on the map. And so we have to manage quite a lot of different concerns that I guess a lot of developers are very kind of familiar with. And I would say probably one of the biggest challenges we have is collecting data from such a large variety of places in insane formats, and then normalizing those, carving them up in a uniform way and making it available in a standard kind of interface that I guess the web app can actually interpret and load and do that as quickly as possible. And so we've built a fairly large processing pipeline to do that. So initially it was in Python. We ran into quite a lot of it worked well. We were able to load in a lot of data from a lot of different sources, normalize that, fix a lot of what was happening with the geometry. So polygons are just an absolute nightmare coming from kind of the real world onto a map kind of world. So typically fire agencies in particular, they'll send out an aircraft over an area. The data that comes back from those aircraft is usually in 3D. That's then converted to a 2D polygon. And so you end up with a lot of projection errors where there's like bow ties and just weirdnesses kind of going on with like the polygons. And so we've got to, collect that in whatever format's kind of available, and you have no control over that whatsoever, and then make it work and show it on a map. And I guess the original pipeline we built kind of, it did that, it did it kind of okay. But unfortunately, I got like way too many alerts on my phone to say like the processing pipeline had just stopped working. Usually through just errors that we just weren't able to reproduce. They were out of memory errors a lot of the time for processing like a polygon that comes back as like an 800 kilobyte kind of file is then consuming like 32 gig of memory that just kills computers, and it makes absolutely no sense. And so in the end, we ended up rewriting the platform from scratch in Rust of all languages, which I think at the time, so this was maybe 2 years ago or so, was a pretty tricky kind of call because I guess as a language, it was something that kind of gave us some really good confidence. It was strictly typed. There were a lot of assertions that we could kind of make like on the actual data themselves. So the data coming in had to be in floating points. It couldn't be strings. And then from that, we could then make sure that those floating points were within bounds. We could then make sure that those bounds were within like a structured kind of polygon, and then normalizing that, correcting errors, and then storing that in a database. And then after that data was inserted into a database to then perform geospatial intersections and to determine who is close or within that polygon that would want to receive an alert. And so I guess kind of really just layering these kind of capabilities together has really kind of resulted in that final product where like as a user, you come and look at it and it's like, oh yeah, I've got some dots on a map and I can see kind of absolutely what's going on. But it is an absolute heartache to kind of get to that point where, you're just killing computers trying to process these insane kind of geometries or broken projections or
I mean, I think that's the hard work, right? That's why this isn't easy to do. And I think, everybody has their own concerns, and you're trying to make a much more general use thing that is not specialized to all the people who originate this data. So I think you're playing a huge part in translating all that so that it becomes useful to normal people who just want to open up a web browser or open up their phone.
They absolutely do. They want to pop their phone open, 2 seconds later, they have all of the information in front of them. And it's taken years, I think, to kind of get to that point.
Amazing. So I'm seeing a mix of, I see markers, I see polygons, I see this very gorgeous representation of wind as like this kind of animated pulses moving around the map. What kind of design considerations did you have to put into, choosing what to show and when, and what not to show, and kind of how to layer things? How did you go about, choosing the visual presentation of bushfire?
It's a good question. So I guess like as a non-geospatial kind of person, really, my kind of intuition is really guided by like dumb rules. It's red is hot, blue is cold, red is fast, blue is slow. And if you see something moving across the screen quickly, you see, well, that's going quickly. And so I guess that kind of basis is what's kind of driven a lot of the design decisions, in that what's kind of shown on screen should be kind of intuitive to understand as much as possible to any kind of layperson coming across this. With that said, we're also not kind of shying away from putting kind of too much on there as well. So like the wind barbs where you see like a kind of that feather pennant kind of setup, that's completely unintuitive when you first look at it. But then there's like a legend view, and once you interpret it, you can then really quickly kind of see and understand what's happening. Same with kind of hotspots. Like once you can understand what the meaning kind of is behind it, then you can really quickly and intuitively know and learn kind of what's happening. And so I think that's actually been something that's worked quite well, is like people are using the app and seeing something that's kind of immediately useful to them, and then they kind of come back and they're wanting to kind of learn more and understand even more about what's kind of happening around them. And so that kind of intuition and like naive learning is something that's worked kind of incredibly well. I think one of the other things that has helped significantly as well is from the first version that was put out, it includes like a feedback button. And from that, all sorts of kind of feedback has kind of come in to say like, hey, this is rubbish. Can you fix this? Or I really like this. And so that's kind of been a really good kind of check to make sure that what is out there and what is visualized is understandable. And people are also finding and reporting bugs that we may not catch as well, which has just been, amazing. So it's evolved naturally.
That's great. The feedback button I can relate to, because I spend a lot of time working on the Mapbox docs system, and we have a little button there as well. So to everyone watching this, like there are humans on the other side of those buttons that can actually take that feedback and act on it. And I think you always put little GitHub icons and things on a lot of little smaller projects we put up, which is those who know what that is can always just go into an issue queue and make an issue, but it kind of it it's not, there's a higher barrier to entry for people who don't know what GitHub is. So I think the feedback buttons really make it much more welcoming to all. So I'm glad to hear that you're incorporating user feedback. That's great. So you mentioned that you didn't have a lot of spatial experience. So can you tell me more about your journey to become, obviously now you're a geospatial expert if you're writing, full backends with Rust and feeding all that stuff into, really compelling front end. So how is that journey for you as somebody coming in later in their, in their adventures in computer science and digital and technology?
Yeah. It's been really interesting and kind of fascinating. I think one of the things I really like about it is that it's so real world and applicable to everyday people. But I guess like what I've done is, I guess it's kind of guided problem solving, in that I've usually wanted to do something such as like display a wind overlay on the map.
Mm.
And then it's just been a problem of how does this work? Like, where does the wind data come from? How's that data represented? Like, and then learning that it's these arrays or matrices of numbers that are coming out of supercomputers, and they're in archaic formats that and like a couple of 100 megs that we then have to process and format and normalize, and to then make available to as many people as possible in a tiny file that's downloaded within like milliseconds. Mm-hmm. And so I guess kind of just that really problem solving kind of process is just something that's kind of helped in understanding what's happening. Learning about projections and coordinate systems and understanding they're two different things. Like, it's still something that I don't entirely understand. But at the same time, like, I kind of don't really need to, because I just take whatever format it kind of is and convert it into, I guess this EPSG 3857 or whatever that is. And yeah, so I guess one of the things that has kind of helped massively is just kind of going to first principles on a lot of these things. It's just going and finding specifications for some of these crazy formats, looking in different libraries that exist and using different libraries that exist out there. So things like the Geos library, Shapely on Python, GDAL. I guess although that is not kind of they're not kind of part of the kind of current solution that we're using, they kind of had the building blocks to kind of look at and understand how that works and to really put that into practice. And so Now we're using like the GeoRust project, which is kind of the Rust kind of re-implementation of a lot of the Geo and Geo's kind of library. But I guess kind of with a modern take, or a more modern take, in that you can now leverage multi-threading and better memory management, and kind of building on some of those critical assertions that like the numbers coming in have to be actual numbers, and not crazy strings of stuff. And so then from that, like we've built and leveraged a lot of that amazing work that exists already, and built like our own kind of library to process geometry called Magic Geo, which is actually something we'll hopefully open source at some stage, to take like the crazy input and then generate some kind of usable output from that. And yeah, I think probably one of the things that I've kind of undersold in some ways is like actually working on those edge cases is something that has probably helped significantly kind of across the platform. So understanding like the problems that I was talking about with polygons, like that's something that we've been able to then leverage and really kind of stabilize across the platform, so it is reliable, because that's what people are wanting. They want to know as soon as something happens, and with as much precision as kind of possible. And so, yeah, kind of bringing all of this together, I'm not getting messages saying stuff's kind of like stopped working, or notifications have stopped being sent out because something's crashed or ran out of memory or something.
Awesome. I think I definitely saw Mapbox GLJS in the web version, but I know you have mobile apps. So maybe you can tell us about that as well. And I think you're using search. Can you just tell us a bit more about, how you're using, various Mapbox tools in this app?
Yeah. Yeah, so as you mentioned, so we're running Mapbox GLJS. So we're running that on Windows, macOS, iOS, and Android. So essentially the same code, the same framework is used across platforms. So it's all, so the front end's all in TypeScript. We're using React, or now Preact, to kind of stitch the actual user interface together. Pretty much everything's kind of custom built, or we're leveraging existing libraries. So we're using Mapbox GLJS as, I guess, kind of the geospatial kind of front end engine. And so the client that we've implemented is, I guess, kind of our backend or our API will send through a desired state. And so the desired state is show these layers, show these controls. These are the restrictions to kind of place on the client and how to render that data.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess because of that, it gives us something that gives us a lot of kind of certainty in how it's going to behave and what it's going to do, as opposed to kind of implementing a lot of the logic within the front end, and then having to deal with Apple submission reviews through Apple and Google. And I guess then, like if we have a bug within that interface, then we're waiting many days to get that approved across platforms, etc. Mm-hmm. And so I guess like our design has really focused around how do we make sure that what is provided to users is as stable and reliable as possible. We're also using, originally we were using Google Maps. I wasn't able to get the wind overlay to work correctly on that with the different kind of devices that we're running. And then shifted to Leaflet. And then I guess we kind of hit limits of what was possible in Leaflet, particularly performance-wise. And you guys brought out the pretty cool 3D terrain kind of overlays and stuff, which we've then kind of incorporated, so you can see like wind moving up like a mountain, which is pretty awesome. But critically important. So fire will move much faster up a hill. It's much more dangerous, etc. We're also using Mapbox Search and Your Geocoding. There's a couple of plugins that we're using. So there's like the full screen plugin that I think you spec'd originally. The Draw plugin, so to draw shapes on the map. Geolocation plugin. And we also use Mapbox Studio for just tailoring some of the actual imagery behind the scenes just a little bit more. So adding topographic kind of lines so you can see like mountain heights like in actual numbers is kind of useful. And then we've also built a couple of custom controls on top of that. So you can see the wind overlay straight there. We also have like a time machine control, which allows people to kind of go back in time. So I was actually just checking where the wind was blowing from those fires and why that was actually going into New York. So I just double checked that it was coming from where I thought it was coming from. Layer control, sidebar, and a couple of other things. But yeah, it's, I guess, kind of a nice way to just bring it all together into an intuitive kind of interface.
Excellent. So glad. Yeah, there's more than meets the eye there. So I had overlooked, GL draw I take for granted, but that's probably important if you want to draw that circle radius or let people choose an area that they care about. And yeah, so yeah, check out. You should actually. I'll plug our plugins page, which actually just got a little makeover and has some images in it now. So for anyone out there who's building a Mapbox GLJS plugin, we would love to feature it on that page. And maybe I don't know if you have any that you're going to publish that are maybe useful to other people, we'd love to see them as well. So lastly, what are you working on next with Bushfire that you're really excited to talk about or share? What's the next step in this adventure?
Yeah, so I guess one of the things that we're most excited about, at least just in the immediate term, is after we were talking previously, we didn't have the globe projection working correctly with our wind overlay and a couple of other things. So we went about kind of refactoring, I guess, that to get kind of things to work. And so you should be able to see that at the moment. And then I guess beyond that, what we've largely built has been, I guess, kind of a proving ground within Australia. And then I guess we're taking like small steps into the US and Canada, really just to kind of understand the environment, understand the different formats and things like that, that we're kind of needing to deal with, partnerships that we need to kind of build as well. But yeah, for the most part, I guess it's growing that out and building that out as much as we kind of can within kind of different areas. And so I guess the end result is to have a platform that can be used wherever you are kind of in the world, and you know what's going on around you. More people are kind of kept safe. And I guess it's really just that ability to use technology to kind of make a real difference. I guess is kind of what I'm excited about. Like we're taking it from like buttons and all of that, which is like super useful for, I guess, a lot of this work. But at the same time, it's having that kind of real world impact, I guess, is kind of what I find most exciting.
Amazing, and I know you will. So we'll keep an eye on Bushfire. Hope to hear great things about improved coverage and more data feeds being normalized and brought into your pipeline. So thank you so much for your time today, and look forward to seeing your progress as you build this app. So really appreciate you sharing with us today.
Thanks, Chris. Really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Take care. We'll see you at the next Developer Spotlight.
Thanks.